What is the Christian Arts and Entertainment Podcast? We're going to find out on this, our very first episode. Welcome and thank you for joining us on this, our very first episode. Being such, we're going to do things possibly a little bit differently than what you're going to see in the future. In the future, we're going to have lots of guests, lots of conversations about the Christian arts and Christian entertainment communities. But today, I just wanted to focus on giving you a snapshot or an introduction to what this podcast is going to be about. First of all, thank you for joining us. You could be joining us via podcast on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. We are going to be broadcasting this in both places, audio and video. My name is Kevin Newsom. I am the host of this podcast, and I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I am a musician. I am a writer. I grew up learning to read music at the same time I was learning to read. Music has always been part of my family. It's been part of my family for generations. I was part of the band program throughout school, learned to play trombone, and went to college at Mississippi State for 2 years, and then finished at William Carey University in Hattiesburg, Mississippi with a music education degree. Studied and mentored under the legendary David Young, and then if you've been in the band community and the band culture in Mississippi, you've probably heard that name. By the time I was a senior in high school, I was the 10th best trombonist in the state of Mississippi as far as high school students were concerned. I can play, if you give me a couple of weeks to practice, about 12 instruments. Just make sure I have that a little bit of time to brush up before you ask me to play them for you. After college, I spent about 2.5 years or so teaching band in public schools, and then God called me to something else. And my family and I, we moved to New Orleans, where I attended the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary and received my master's degree in theology. From there, I spent about 4 years pastoring before I landed here at Malvern Hill Baptist Church in Camden, South Carolina, as their worship and discipleship pastor. And here at Malvern Hill, I have the privilege of being able to use both my degrees at the exact same time. And it's just a thrilling experience to be a part of a church like this. As I mentioned at the beginning, I'm also a published author. I've been writing for most of my life, started writing in junior high. And about 10 years ago or so, published my first fiction novel. I have a series of fiction novels, 4 novels in total, that have been award finalists, that you can check those out if you want to. I write fiction under the pen name of Oliver D. King. If you want to find out more about that, go to oliverdking.com. I've also written a nonfiction book that you can find on Amazon about generational ministry, and that's written under my initials KW Newsom. All right, so that's a little bit about me, about my background, and about why I want to do this podcast, because I'm interested not just in things theological and the Christian community and church and everything, but also I'm heavily invested in different arts venues as well. So that's a little bit about me, and now I want to tell you a little bit about the show. So the whole purpose of this show is to wrestle with 2 specific questions, and we're going to ask these questions of every guest. Every conversation we have is going to come back around to these 2 questions at some point or another, even if they're not asked in these exact ways. And those questions are: what is the Christian's responsibility when consuming art and entertainment? And the second question is: what is the Christian artist's responsibility when creating art and entertainment? So this podcast is going to cover Christian art and entertainment from every angle, from the consumer angle to the creator's angle. We're going to talk about all of these things, and so it'll have something for everybody if you're interested in Christian art and entertainment. Format is going to be, as I said earlier, podcast and YouTube. So we'll have weekly guests, and we're going to rotate as best we can our focus between the consuming and the creating. And the ideal episode is going to mix the two so that you will get a balance between things of consumption and things of creating art and entertainment from a Christian perspective. So what are we talking about? In the broadest sense, we are talking about aesthetics, Christian aesthetics. And so the definition, if you don't know what aesthetics are, aesthetics are, it's the full realm of what can be known through the senses, or the philosophy of beauty and art. So put another way, it is the conversation between the creator of something, their intention, which dictates the form of their work, and then communicates to the receiver, and the receiver's emotional response after receiving it. So there's the four things: intention, form, impression, and response. And these four things make up, basically, if you think about these four things, this is what we're talking about when we're talking about aesthetics. What is the intention? What is the form? What is the impression on the receiver? And what is the response from the receiver? Everything has an aesthetic. So consider my coffee mug, for example. It was made with a specific emotional intention. They want me to like it, to find it useful, to be pleased with its appearance, to buy more and to recommend it to others. They want their craftsmanship to be superior to others who do similar work. So that is the intention of the creator when creating this. And that intention helped to form the work itself. And so they chose colors and materials and designs to help realize that intention. A paint coating that's grippable when wet, a squared off handle that's easy to hold. But aesthetics doesn't stop there. It continues the conversation to me, the receiver. Does my impression of its form complement or contradict the maker's intention in regards to the form? In my case, it does. I actually think my impression is pretty much what they intended me to have. Does my emotional response fall in line with the maker's emotional intention? Maybe. I don't hate it, but I'm not sure I'm ready to declare it's the best in its class. I'm probably not as emotionally attached to this thing as the creators would have me to be. That's aesthetics. Everything has an aesthetic. And when we narrow the lens to look specifically at art and entertainment, we don't have to talk in terms of whether or not the art is good or bad, but in terms of whether or not the art and entertainment fulfills the aesthetic intentions of the maker and the expectations of the consumer. So as we talk about Christian arts and entertainment, you're going to hear a lot of discussion about intention and expectation. What is the intention of the creator? What is the expectation of the consumer? And so we'll start there when we begin to evaluate things and try to have that conversation, some real conversations about what Christian art and entertainment means. Finally, I want to leave you with a few things that Francis Schaeffer says in his book, Art and the Bible. And these three things, he says a lot of things in that book, but there's three things I want to sort of give you that will kind of define the approach that we're going to take on this podcast as we evaluate Christian art and entertainment. First of all, worldview comes through and is magnified through art. It can't be helped. Art magnifies the worldview of the creator. Though the Christian doesn't necessarily have to create or consume art of a solely Christian worldview, we should expect that the body of work created by the Christian, or the majority of art and entertainment consumed by the Christian, should reflect that Christian worldview. Otherwise, it becomes spiritually out of balance. Christian art. Number two, Christian art is by no means always religious art. That is, art that deals with religious themes. Again, it's worldview that comes into play. In order to be faithful to our talents, we should want to create the best art we can for God, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be religious art. It doesn't necessarily have to be evangelistic in nature. So long as we're not betraying our worldview and we tell the truth through our art, that Christian worldview is going to come out. It's going to be magnified, and we don't have to purpose or have that intention of creating something that's evangelistic in nature for the receivers to get the impression of our worldview and to receive the worldview that we're communicating. Thirdly, there is no such thing as a godly style or ungodly style. A style is preference. There are styles all over the place, and some people will say that certain styles lend themselves to being more Christian than others, and I would take issue with that. I don't believe there is any such thing as a godly style or ungodly style, so I am firmly in agreement with what Francis Schaeffer says about this. Style is preference. Style is neutral. What matters is the intention of the creator and how the consumer receives it. What matters is the worldview that is being elevated through that creation. So those are the things that we're going to look at. Those are some of the ways we're going to approach Christian art and entertainment as we have guests on, as we have interviews and reviews and such. That's where we're going to be. So thank you for joining me on this very first podcast on the Christian Arts and Entertainment Podcast. Next week, we're going to have our first guest. I hope you'll continue to join us. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe, click the bell icon so that you don't miss any new episodes. If you're listening on the podcast, make sure you subscribe through your podcast app so that you don't miss a single episode either. So thank you for joining us. See you next week.